All right. For week 13 Friday, we're talking about pages 100 through 123. And yeah, I'll go ahead and get started. Anything else to say? So, the investigation continues. So poor Al Dewey. He's so personally invested in this case. These calls are getting routed to his house, waking him out of bed. Some people are trying to be helpful, but some of them are absolute rubbish. So someone calls him drunk, inebriated, tried to confess. He says that he done it. And of course, as soon as they send the reward, he will let them know who he is. So there is a newspaper who has offered $1,000 as a reward for information leading to the solution of the crime. So Dewey is stressed. His leads are adding up to 0. But there are a few bits of information they've discovered since then. So for one thing, they found that Nancy had hidden her gold wristwatch in her shoe and have started to re-examine robbery as a motive. And they've realized that something was missing. Kenyon had a little radio, a gray portable Zenith radio. This may be sounding familiar. So the radio is missing. So Dewey isn't fully convinced, but he does believe at this point that there are definitely 2 killers, and it appears that one of them may have made off with the radio. The other interesting thing that Dewey is thinking of now is personality, because when you have 2 killers, a lot of times one is more dominant than the other. You have a dominant and a submissive partner. And Dewey has become convinced that one of the killers is responsible for touches of a certain twisted tenderness. So the mattress box, for example, it was placed under Mr. Clutter, but there wouldn't really be any reason for it to be placed under Clutter except to make him more comfortable. They're about to kill him, but one of the killers seemed to want to make him more comfortable. Other details that support that: the bed covers tuck in Nancy Clutter. We mentioned that, of course, she couldn't, reasonably pull up the bed covers around herself, so someone had tucked her in. The pillow under Kenyon's head, the initial thought was that it was put under there to make him an easier target, but now they're thinking maybe it's about comfort. So these little touches of comfort, and there's actually another one that the investigators haven't considered at this point, but these are making them think that there are 2 personalities at stake here. Okay, so that's kind of the main things in this bit so far. We just see the effects of this case on Dewey's family and his life, and the incessant telephone calls that he's receiving. Okay, so back to our killers. And this section begins on page 106. Very short little bit here. And oh, look at that! A gray Zenith portable radio has made its way to Mexico with them. Well, they're not quite there yet at this point, but they're pretty darn close. So that answers that mystery, at least for us. The investigators, of course, will have to wait until later. But yeah, so that is the progress that Perry and Dick are making, driving towards Mexico. The next bit I thought was interesting. We know that Beverly Clutter, who was engaged, had planned to marry her fiancé not too far in the future. So upon finding the opportunity of all of her family being gathered together for, her family's funeral, she just says, well, we're all here, let's do it. So I can't say that I would do the same under the circumstances, but I suppose it was a very practical consideration. So yeah, rather than getting married when they originally wanted to, which of course I'm sure they would have felt the loss of Beverly's family, they just went ahead and pulled the trigger. Another interesting thing from the Clutter family, Mr. Fox, Mr. Howard Fox, Bonnie Fox's brother, tries to sway public opinion a little bit. Says, I know that, you're thinking these killers should be killed, but the deed is done. Taking another life cannot change it. We should forgive as God would have us do. So it's really interesting, I think, the Christian interpretation of the death penalty, how so many people who are devout Christians speak against it and speak in favor of forgiveness as God would have us do. But then also how many people speak out for it and argue for wrath and vengeance, also on religious grounds. It's a very complicated issue, of course, but yeah. So anyways, the next section is intriguing as well. We have 2 sections in a row that deal with our killers, starting at the bottom of page 107. One of these perspectives is primarily from Dick's perspective. So this first one, we're kind of in Dick's head. The second perspective, it's basically the same scene twice. The second perspective is from Perry's perspective. So it's like we're hearing 2 sides of a conversation, and rather than bouncing back and forth between the thoughts of our 2 criminals, we're getting one thought, and then we're getting the scene all over again with the other's thoughts. So from Dick's perspective, this conversation kind of goes one way. Now, one thing that I'll go ahead and say it now. One thing that I do want you to notice, and this is on page 108, is Dick has a pair of binoculars in this scene. And the pair of binoculars have the initials HWC. So first, just think about, who could those binoculars belong to? Who have they ran into recently who had the initials HWC? But also, the other part of the conversation has to do with their crime. So it seems like Perry is the one who wants to keep bringing it up, and Dick kind of wants to forget about it and avoid it. Why couldn't Perry shut up? What did it do? Always dragging it up. It's really annoying. Just forget it. So anyways, Perry says, there must be something wrong with us. Dick rejects that. Absolutely not. I am totally normal. I'm totally balanced, totally sane. There's nothing wrong with me. He does mention that he thinks there may be something wrong with Perry, references Perry's temper, but Dick believes that he is totally normal. Now, one thing that Dick says to contradict Perry's assertion, that I would have never thought we could do something like that, is Dick confronts him about the crime that he supposedly committed. So he says, well, supposedly you killed a guy before this, right? And Perry says, oh, well, that's different. He was of a different race and less valuable, and obviously that was totally different. So kind of brushing off Dick's skepticism with some racism there. Good job, Perry. But anyways, Perry definitely seems preoccupied with the crime. So then when we get the same scene from Perry's perspective, we learn a little bit more about the background. So first off, Perry has become mentally preoccupied with this crime. It's not that he wants to talk about it, he can't help himself. So his memories are haunting him, and we get these awful details, some of which we know what they are and some of which we don't. Blue light exploding in a black room. So that has to be one of the gunshots. The glass eyes of a big toy bear. That definitely has to be Nancy's teddy bear. And then this sequence of words, oh no, oh please, no, 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 don't, oh please, don't, please. Now, on the surface, that could have come from any of them, but physically, who is the only one who would have been able to say those words? And then we have a silver dollar rolling across a floor. We have boot steps on hardwood stairs, the sounds of breathing, the gasps, the hysterical inhalations of a man with a severed windpipe. Now, of course, that last one can only be Mr. Clutter. The silver dollar is interesting, though, and that one will be revealed to us later, the exact circumstances surrounding that. So, anyways, Perry is haunted by his memories. Now, we do learn a little bit about Perry's history here. He has a complicated family life, and we will also get a lot of that in the next reading section as well. He had a sister who jumped out of a window of a San Francisco hotel. He had a brother who drove his wife to suicide and then killed himself. He only has one living sibling, so we get the sense that he comes from a very, very dysfunctional place. His mother was an alcoholic, strangled to death on her own vomit. Perry has lived a dark life for sure. So anyways, moving forward, we finally get the truth about the man who Perry supposedly killed. So this is the story that he told. This story about this transient man who was laying around naked, and for whatever reason, he just decided to kill him just randomly for absolutely no good reason, on impulse even. The truth of the story, Perry had known a Negro named King, but he didn't kill him. So that story just came out of Perry's mind, out of Perry's imagination, and he's been telling that lie to Dick ever since. So anyways, that kind of rounds out that scene from both perspectives. And then at the top of page 113, we just get further confirmation that Dick is a complete, I can't think of a great school appropriate word off the top of my head, but he is not a nice person. Dick swerves towards a poor little mangy dog on the side of the road, and it just completely splatters him. So I find, whenever we encounter people who entertain heartless cruelty towards animals for no apparent reason, we had this with Mildred as well, we tend to think much less of them, even sometimes, than people who have committed horrific crimes against humans, because we do associate animals with innocence. I mean, what did that old dog ever do to Dick? Good gosh. Okay. The next little section, just some more reactions from the community. So some more theories are going around, rumors, conspiracy theories. One theory goes from the bottom of 113 to the top of 114, involving Taylor Jones. You may remember this name from the first part, because Taylor Jones is the richest man in the area. So they are suspecting, maybe these killers, relying on some faulty directions, ended up at the Clutter house instead of the Jones house, and maybe they killed the wrong family. So that, of course, is definitely a possibility, even as far as we know at this point. Another reaction comes from this kind of prissy English woman, and of course you'll notice the partial italicizing of these words to give us this sense of her very sophisticated and eloquent and emphatic diction. Just adore it. It's very different from our other life. Oh, I don't really miss it. So definitely some personality shown there through the stylizing of this woman's words, and lots and lots of hyphens and things. Hyphens are fun. The other thing we have here, yes, the Ashidas. So on page 116 to 117, Mrs. Ashida mentions that her family is moving. Now, they were considering moving before. In the last conversation that Mrs. Ashida had with Herb Clutter, she talked about them moving. But now, they're definitely moving. They had lots of discussions about it, about this farm in Nebraska. But once Herb and his family died, Mrs. Ishida said something around here had come to an end, personally, for me. So some people are abandoning the community in the wake of what has happened. Okay, next section. We are in Mexico. And we are on a boat called the Estrellita. And we have Dick, Perry, and two new friends. Otto, a rich middle-aged German man, and a young Mexican who is referred to as the cowboy, I believe. Yes, the cowboy. So they're hanging out on the boat, doing some fishing, living the life. The focal point of this scene is Perry catching a fish. We do get a little bit of information about their Mexico journey. Obviously, they have not found treasure. They had to pawn basically everything they had, including the binoculars and the radio, just to be able to get by. Dick has become involved with several prostitutes. So, good job, Dick. So anyways, we get to the end here, and Perry really wants to catch a big one. He wants to get a fish. That's what we all want when we go fishing, right? Big old fish. So the climactic moment comes at the bottom of 119 and the top of 120. As Perry catches a 10-foot sailfish. That is an impressive size fish, to be sure. So when they get into the dock, Otto commissions several portraits of Perry, and the photographs that are taken really focus on Perry's expression, his look of unflawed fulfillment. One of his dreams has come true, as if the tall yellow big bird has hauled him to heaven. So I just want you to think on a personal level, in this moment, do we feel happy for Perry? Are we okay with him, kind of living the life and catching a big old fish and being excited about it? Or are we bitter and vengeful, as many people in the town of Holcomb certainly are, about what he has done, or what we suppose he did? And, do we want bad things to be happening to him? This is not appropriate karma. He should be suffering and in trouble right now. So anyways, just a thought. And then this last section in this particular reading section, we come back to Mr. Helms. Remember, Mr. Helm was one of the last people to see the family alive. He mentions a theory that he has about what happened to the family. The day that they died, and this is about the middle of page 121, a pair of Mexicans, and it doesn't sound like he talked to them to actually confirm their heritage, so we'll say probably, Hispanics, visited the house, and Mr. Helm seems to think that perhaps they were turned away from work and maybe had something to do with what happened to Mr. Clutter. That does seem to be a conflicted account, though, because the life insurance guy insists that he does not recall these individuals on that day. So somebody's memory is obviously not quite right. But as Mr. Helm is thinking about this, he looks up at the window, looks up at Bonnie's window, and he sees a person. He sees a hand holding back a curtain and eyes. So he freaks out, of course. He's like, I don't believe in spooks, so who could it be? So he calls some law enforcement. And on page 122, near the bottom, Mr. Dewey and some other fellas have a chat with the individual who invaded the Clutter house, Jonathan Daniel Adrian. So the first questions, of course, are how and why. So he explains the how. The why, he said he was curious. Now, when something like this happens, a violent crime, of course, there are going to be people who have questions about it, who are curious about what happened. But it does look extremely suspicious for Mr. Adrian to be there because when they go to his car, they see a 12-gauge shotgun and a hunting knife, which of course are the exact weapons that killed the Clutter family, and then also the hunting knife that severed Mr. Clutter's throat. So Al Dewey is kind of thinking, oh my God, maybe we got the killer. Of course, we know that he's not correct, but it does seem like a really, really promising lead at first because particularly with serial killers, they are often known to come back to the scene of a crime and try to involve themselves in the investigation and maintain their connection to what happened so that they can gain, pleasure from that association. So initially, super promising. Ultimately, doesn't really go anywhere. Okay, so this next section starts on page 123, and it goes and goes and goes and goes and goes all the way to page 147. So that's why the next section is from 123 to 147, because there just isn't any other way to break it up. It's just one long description of Perry's life. So we're going to get an intense amount of detail about Perry, his past, his family, his life, the trauma that he's been through. That is all going to come to light in the next section. See, it's still going. Okay, so this is the end of the section. It goes on for quite a bit, and that's one reason that the last section of part 2 is so short, only 7 pages, because, it's all that's left in the section. It doesn't make sense to make it any longer. And it didn't really make sense to add it onto this because after reading for, 24 pages, you probably need a break. So anyways, that will be the next reading section. And if it were me and I was reading this, I would honestly just have like a running list next to me, like things we learn about Perry, and just jot down information as it comes to you. Because though it does come in narrative format, it's going to be hard to think back and remember all that information after the fact. So 123 through 147 is going to be things about Perry. But of course, make sure that you've taken the 100 through 123 quiz.